out of control, all that and more when we return.
Welcome in to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to all things Devy and C2C. Hosted by John Arrington and Aaron Wilcox. This dynamic duo brings you actionable strategies with player-driven analysis for your Devy and C2C leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive in back into Devy. Welcome to the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, John Arrington, joined normally by Aaron Wilcox, but not tonight. But we do have Andy Starr as always as well, and we do still have to fix that intro. So we appreciate Andy being here. We appreciate you guys being here. Hopefully we'll get some more in the chat here because it's time to dive back into Devy. It's time to talk about college football again. We've been talking about rookies for so long, and we've been talking. It's just been, it obviously we have to. It's part of our jobs, and that's an important finale that we get to, a crescendo, if you will, that we have to get to the Devy drafts or I'm sorry, the rookie drafts, the NFL draft, and all that kind of stuff. But we love getting back into Devy, talking college football, talking the players that are going to be getting to that NFL draft and eventually our rookie drafts for next year. And the thing is, every single person is doing the same thing. Every pod, every website, every analyst is doing the same exact thing right now. But man, there's a lot of bad analysis out there. And this is not me tooting my own horn, tooting Andy's horn, tooting Aaron's horn, or anything like that. I can just tell you from years of experience that the players that are being pushed up into the top 10, top 20, top 30 of these NFL mocks and things like that are not going to be there when it's all said and done, just like they weren't from the NFL mocks from last year and so on and so forth. But I've been rambling on for long enough. We need to check in with Andy. What's going on here, buddy?
It's that time of the year again, and I feel like this is one of those years, kind of like last year, where the players coming back weren't necessarily, elite. We haven't had like a CJ Stroud level quarterback prospect in a few years coming back to college. So these mock drafts are way too early, which they do, in their defense, tell you, hey, these are way too early. We're just putting it out there for something to click on. And it becomes kind of a joke when you're reading it because there's a lot of projection, a lot of things that maybe they'll put guys in there just because they're on Texas or they're on USC or they're on one of these big blue chip programs and they think, oh, these guys always get a quarterback or a running back or a wide receiver drafted early, and it's not necessarily the right move. And we have a benefit of being a smaller market podcast, so we can punch up at these guys who are writing for like ESPN and On3 and say, what are you guys doing here? Like we can do better than that at least. I guess I can't speak to like the linebackers and all that other stuff that they're doing in these mock drafts, but as far as the positional players go on offense, they're making some pretty egregious errors, and it needs to be at least brought up and called out when we see it.
Yeah, going back to last year, we were looking at, this time last year, people were saying Quinn Ewers was going to be there. People were saying Carson Beck was going to be there. I think Andy had said it earlier in the chat how, you have they feel the need to push up five QBs into the first round every single time they do a mock draft. And when I say they, I'm saying the general they. I'm not trying to like literally talk about any one particular person. Yes, we're going to be talking about Todd McShay's mock draft here today, but it's not just him. There's so many other. There's just even people that aren't necessarily analysts. There's just a lot of discussion on Twitter right now. But once again, it's that time to start diving back into Devy. Everyone's doing it. Not everyone's doing it very well. So that's what we're here to do. In the past that we've, and once again, this is not me trying to act like we hit on every single thing that we say, especially this early on. But this time last year we were talking about Jackson Dart, where how we felt like he wasn't getting enough respect, and unfortunately it took a while. It's not like he got the respect he deserved right away, or even in season or anything like that. I mean, it really took until what I guess like a month ago to the NFL draft, like before we actually got
Yeah.
anything, got the actual respect that we were looking for Jackson Dart. But that's just one name. Obviously, that we can go back and we can mention others, but just saying those are the names that we're looking for that we're going to talk about today because there's going to be names like Garrett Nussmeier. There's going to be names like Drew Aller and names like that where it's like that. Yes, of course, anyone could technically take that step, but is it likely? And it's not very likely.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think when you sent us this, you sent it to me and Aaron a couple days ago. This mock draft, I was like, why is it that every mock draft, the day after the NFL draft, like the way too early year before, always has five quarterbacks going in the first round. It's not like that's the norm. That happened a couple years ago, which no one expected it to happen then. It did. This year we got two. Most years I feel like it's two, three if it's a decent quarterback class. So this idea that there's going to be, in this case, Todd McShay has four quarterbacks going in the top 10. Like let's reel it back a little bit. I know there's a QB craze and need in the NFL, but just because Drew Lar or Garrett Nussmeier had like a 70 plus QBR last year doesn't necessarily mean they're just locked in as a first round quarterback. If Garrett Nussmeier was a first round quarterback next year, he would have came out in this draft this year when we only had one quarterback go in the first 25 picks, well 24 picks before Dart came off the board. So to think that Nussmeier is just the QB1 at 101 it's highly projective and kind of just irresponsible, really.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. We can go through the numbers here in a little bit. First, let's check in with the chat. We got Jeff DiMatteo in the chat. He says, Beck, ew. Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, he kind of hid some of his some of his weaknesses for a little bit, and it did seem like he was going to be one of the top end quarterbacks. And obviously, we know now that is definitely not happening unless he gets that magical Cam Ward Miami bump. Then maybe he can he can change something now that he is at Miami. And then Jeff also says, I shoulder checked McShay at the Senior Bowl registration desk had to establish dominance. Hey, I mean, that's the way you got to do it. And maybe that's why he's putting out stuff like this now, because you knocked all of the sense out of him. And, now he's doing, now he's putting Garrett Nussmeier in the top 10 and things like that. But all joking aside, why don't we get into that mock here? And like you said, there's four QBs. Who are those four QBs that are being mocked in the first round right now?
Yeah, so in the top 10, as I stated, he has Nussmeier going first overall. The teams are kind of irrelevant here, so I'm not going to even mention that. At fourth, he does have Lenore Sellers at going, and then also fifth, Cade Klubnik, and seventh, Drew Lar. So those are the four QBs going in the top 10 of this particular mock draft.
Yeah, so the Nuss one is just completely insane. It's 100% projection. It's hoping. Uh, I guess people were kind of doing the same thing with Cam Ward last year and saying like he could be the 101, but we don't see the type of step forward that we saw from Cam Ward this past season all that often. You don't see a guy going from PFF graded 70 QB to a 95 or whatever. You don't see the guy going from intended air yards of like 8 to an intended air yards of almost 10, and the big time throw rate doubling. That doesn't happen all that often. Not to say that it can happen, but usually you would expect that with a change. Like you're switching teams, you're transferring to a different setup or whatever it might be. You wouldn't expect that with Garrett Nussmeier in the same exact program with the same players, or possibly losing players that were pretty good, and now dealing with younger players or unproven players in your wide receiver, your tight end, whatever it might be. You don't necessarily expect that player to take that next step forward. Like it just you like you saw it with Jaden Daniels a couple of years ago, but Jaden Daniels had the exact same wide receiver core going into year 5 that he had going into year 4. He had wow, why can I not? I was gonna say I was gonna say Malik Willis. It is definitely not Malik Willis.
Neighbors.
Malik Neighbors, thank you, Malik Neighbors, and he had BTJ going into that, going into his 5th year as well. And we don't have that with Nussmeier. So I think the odds are almost stacked against him to take some massive leap that he didn't have, that already this past season. So the only one that really makes sense to me is Lenore Sellers, and that's because he's a young, unproven player who has actually slowly but surely progressed as he's come along. And while he's not a perfect prospect by any means, he is getting better, and he has that superb athleticism, the supreme athleticism where you can say he can be that Anthony Richardson, but maybe he could be Anthony Richardson with the ability to actually pass the ball. And so I could easily see him being a top 5 pick, and that's why I drafted him in our Devy U league. Not to say that I necessarily loved him as a prospect or anything, but if anyone was going to stand out in this class and easily get overdrafted, who was it going to be? It was going to be Lenore Sellers, right?
Oh yeah, I mean absolutely. And he did improve as the year progressed. So I get the hype behind him. We're going to talk about our QB1 in this class, who wasn't on McShay's draft class, Arch Manning, in a little bit, and whether or not some sort of monetary situations keep him behind. But Sellers is in the same class as Quinn Ewers. Now I know he doesn't have the same name, image, likeness pull as, or did I say Quinn Ewers? I meant Arch Manning. As Arch Manning, but he's still a guy that if you're going to say Arch Manning's going to stay another year, why wouldn't we say the same for Lenore Sellers? Now I'm not saying any of that's right, but that's an argument that I think that would need to be brought up, because if you're just automatically ruling out Arch Manning for 2026, then I'm not saying you have to rule out Lenore Sellers, but it just feels like if you're going to put him in there, then we need, at this point in the season, we don't really know what's going to happen. Let's evaluate the players equally, because we don't know what their decision is going to be. We can't just say Arch Manning's not going to be in this class as well. But the other guy that I don't think is as egregious as the rest of them is Drew Alar. Just because he does have that QBR up near 80. He's a little more accurate than the rest of them. Doesn't turn the ball over as much. Yards per attempt is a little bit higher. But getting back to Nussmeier, yes, he had some good games. He won against Ole Miss in dramatic fashion. But we're talking about a guy with under 8 yards per attempt, turnover worthy rate over 3%. SEC schedule, he had 8 interceptions. He's going into his 4th season. You already mentioned the weapons. He's got 2 new transfer receivers, Barry and Brown, who I don't think anyone's too stoked about. Nick Anderson, who has been hurt like crazy, had a couple good games for Oklahoma like 2 years ago. And then Aaron Anderson, the slot receiver, who, he's a fine slot receiver, but I'm not going to go home and say he's BTJ or Malik Neighbors or anything like that. And he's losing maybe his favorite target in tight end Mason Taylor. So he's got some work to do. I just don't think it, like you said, like I said, it's highly projective to just say Nussmeier's going to be the 101. I think that playing in the SEC is always going to be difficult. It's transitional in the sense of his weapons that he has now versus what he has last year, and he wasn't even that great last year. So, a lot to dissect, but if we're going to put 4 quarterbacks in the top 10, I don't think Nussmeier belongs there. And honestly, I don't think any 4 QBs belong there at this point in time. It's just one of those years where we don't have that elite level of quarterback talent coming back.
Well, I think at this point, we've talked enough about Nussmeier, but moving on to Alar, I really think at this point it's just everyone saying the same thing. Oh, well, his arm talent, his arm talent, his arm talent. Guys, we are 4 years into his college career now. he pushes the ball down the field at an 8.9 clip. Like, this is not good. He has a 4.4% big time throw rate the past 2 seasons. This is not arm talent. This is not showcasing arm talent. Now you can say, "Oh, well, he's been taught to play scared or whatever." The excuses that I've heard. That is perfectly fine. But the truth of the matter is, we have not seen the arm talent that people are talking about in his college career, and we're 4 years in now. So I get he might have the tools, but at some point you think even with poor wide receivers and things like that, unless he's just absolutely too scared to let go of the ball, like, in which is that going to change in the NFL? How can we sit here and go, oh no, Alar's going to be a thing once he gets to the NFL? You just have to trust it. It's his arm strength. It's amazing. And I honestly, I just wonder if somebody, we get the we get people just repeating the same thing over and over, and that we get the echo chamber, in Devy, in fantasy football, and especially in, like, on Twitter, on podcasts, things like that. Somebody hears something and they just run with it. And I wonder if the Drew Alar arm strength was just one of those things that, like, people ran with, and it's not nearly as good as people actually want to make it out to be.
Yeah, it's I'm not a big film guy. That's no secret. So when I hear arm talent, it just feels like a cop out for somebody trying to.
Yeah.
Not saying that they're wrong, because I can't argue for or against anything like that. But all I can go by is the numbers. And you're absolutely right. Like, he's not pushing the ball down the field, but at least he's accurate. When we're talking about Nussmeier, who's only getting 7.7 yards per attempt, and he's not doing it accurately, you know,
And
it's
he's
not
turning the
he's not
ball
even on,
over.
and he's turning the ball over. It's not like, even at least Bo Nix, who was throwing like 6 yards per attempt, never threw incompletions because he was checking it down like crazy. But what's Nussmeier doing? Um, and then to get back to Alar, yeah, the weapons are still, the wide receivers aren't necessarily there, but that can't be an excuse. He does have a really great running back core to lean back on to take pressure off of him in that sense. They do bring in Trebor Pena from Syracuse, who just transferred there, and then a big G5 receiver, Devontae Ross, who played at Troy last year, I want to say. So we'll see what happens this year. And Devontae Ross is kind of that deep threat. So if he's ever had a chance to really stretch out that arm talent, let's see it this year, because he's got some deep threat playability on that receiving core. Um, but I think I got it down a little bit further in the show sheet for this draft. But I really think we just need to talk about the elephant in the room, is Arch Manning not being on this list.
Mhm.
So
No,
I
I
mean,
agree with you. I definitely think, Alar, and actually, Jeff is still in the chat here. He says Alar has the pole position for the QB1 in 2026. If he can sort out how to read the backside of the play, he's going to find a lot of fans, scouts, and coaches. And probably relating to the arm talent thing, it's a size thing. So people see the size, and they just say, "Oh, he's got the arm to do it." Well, at some point we got to see it in college. I'm sorry. Like, there's, and get the hell out of here with, and this obviously isn't directed at Jeff, but to the people that are going to say, oh, look at Josh Allen. Okay. Josh Allen's Josh Allen. Like, let's, I think we can say pretty easily now that there's not too many Josh Allens out there, and everyone that's tried to make it, the next Josh Allen has not worked out very well. So let's actually see it this year. I still have a large, fairly high in the ranks, and I guess it's me saying, like, it is possible, but someone who's much higher than him in the ranks already is Arch Manning. He's done so much more than Alar has done in just basically, what, a year and a half, not even like a full year and a half of college. Playing only for a playing only a handful of games last year, but man, did he look 1,000 times better than Quinn Ewers when he came into the game. It still blows my mind to this day that Sarkisian went back to Ewers, like, knowing what he has. And I think it's just the coaches. I said it before. These coaches are just scared. They're scared to lose their jobs because they lost a game or whatever, because they kept the younger player in. Like, you were never winning a national championship with Quinn Ewers at the helm. You could have possibly won a national championship with Arch Manning at the helm, and hopefully they will. With the in the next couple of years, or within the next year or so. But the real question is, he's obviously eligible to go to the NFL draft this upcoming season. But so much has been made to say that his his coaches, his parents, his family, none of them want him to come out unless he plays a certain amount of games. And I think it's 20 or 21 or whatever it is, and he'll only be at like 18 games played by the end of the season, assuming he plays all of them. It's one of those things where it's like, you start where you're drawing arbitrary lines and all that kind of stuff. It seems really stupid if he goes out and just puts up the season that I believe he can put up. Is he really going to be like, well, nope, I need two more games before I can come out? It just seems so stupid, but at the same time, I know obviously his family is not trying to rush things. They want him to succeed in the NFL, not just succeed in college. They want him to continue that lineation of just being an amazing family, football family, and so they want that to happen. And so I won't put it past them either that he does stay another year. But that's really where it boils down to. And I've heard so many people recently saying how this draft class is going to be amazing for QBs. If Arch Manning's not in it, it might be one of the worst QB draft class we've seen in a long time, and that's coming from the 2025 draft class that we actually just did.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. A guy I like, who we're not even going to be talking about, is John Mateer. I think he's one of the better ones in this class outside of Arch Manning. But to get back to Arch Manning, I think I don't think there's any reason for him to come out this year. If he even if he does play like crazy, there's not really an injury that could happen to him in his senior season that would prevent him from being the number one pick the following year. Anyhow, if he has a really great season, uh, and he's going to be making way more money in college than he would on a rookie scale contract, even as the first overall pick, probably. So and he's already a Manning, like you said, he has the lineage. They're gonna do what they feel is right, and if they feel just staying in college another year and just playing another year on the NIL deal and making $4 or $5 million, they're just gonna do it because why not? And you could say injury, but like QB injuries happen, but I feel like career-ending injuries for a QB don't really happen that often. Now, obviously they could, but I just don't think the risk is that necessarily that high compared to the potential reward of staying another year, getting all that NIL money, still maintaining the first overall draft pick status because that's what he is. I know he only played 7 games last year, but out of these guys coming back, like nobody else is over 10 yards per attempt. Nobody else has an A dot over 11. Nobody else has a big time throw or a turnover worthy throw rate less than 2%. And he's shown that he can rush. I know it's not part of his game, but what do you have, like a 60, 80-yard run when he came in that one game? So he can
Yeah.
do that too if he needs to. Uh, he's the best quarterback in college football right now, hands down. And if he decides to come out, he will be the first overall pick without question.
And he got so much hate coming into to college as well. People said, "Oh, he's only here because he's a Manning. He's only at Texas because he's a Manning. He doesn't deserve it. He was in a small school program. Blah blah blah." We're literally saying, we're looking at the numbers here. He's by far the best quarterback in Debbie in college football right now. I mean, albeit in a small-ish sample, but I think it's a big enough sample to where we can say I think he's a solid quarterback. And so I think, a lot of that was just hating on the Manning name or, wanting to hate on him because he's a Manning and all that kind of stuff. And when it's all said and done, it's like, no, he's actually a solid quarterback. And hopefully, we lost Andy here for a second. So hopefully he'll be back in just a minute. Uh, Jeff says Manning shouldn't be expected to be an early declare. Seems unlikely he'll jump before senior year. And I agree. I just won't put it past him. It's one of those things where, I think people say like an arbitrary line, like 20 games or whatever. And if you're 2 games off of that, I'm not trying to say act like I know, but I just won't put it past him that he would come out with an amazing season. They go out, win a national championship, And it's like, well, what more do I have to prove? Let's go to the NFL and start proving stuff there rather than continuing on here. So I think that's about it for the QBs. Just don't fall for the Nussmeyer stuff, guys. Like he's not very good. He really does have to take a substantial leap forward in order to actually be a good, solid QB. And I mean, honestly, if you, I mean, I don't even want to count the players or anything like that, but it does kind of make me think of Quinn Ewers, and where he was last year, at the beginning of the year, and then again towards the end of the year, and now what was he, a sixth round pick or seventh round pick or whatever the hell he was in the NFL draft? Like the stuff that we've had to talk about and put up with Quinn Ewers, people still pushing him up into their top three and all that, even like halfway through the season. It's just it's actually kind of wild. It's been a wild ride with Ewers.
Yeah, and just to put the cherry on top of the QB discussion, this is eerily similar to last year where we just didn't have that dynamic quarterback number one coming into the year. Cam Ward ascended to that level and he earned it, but we didn't have anybody in the preseason that we could say is like, oh, that's them. Like they're going to do what they did last year and they're going to be QB1. And that's why we get these mock drafts. And like I said, we can't really fault them too much because it is projection. You're just sort of trying to pick which one of these guys is going to take that step forward. So maybe McShay's saying like, oh, let's cast a wide net and put four out there. Maybe one or two of them will hit. But it's our job to tell you is to not fall for them. Just because this guy says one or two or four of these guys are going to be top 10 picks doesn't mean that's going to happen. He's just doing his best shot to say quarterbacks go in the top 10. Which one of these guys do I think has a chance to do it? Here's four of them for your consideration. It's just one of those years where you need to maybe avoid the quarterback position in your Devy or C2C drafts because there's not a guy who you can say comfortably outside of Arch Manning, who we've already talked about him potentially staying another year. There's not a guy you can say comfortably is going to be a top 10 draft pick next year.
No, definitely not. Like I said, I'm banking on Sellers just because we know how the NFL reacts and everything, but it's not necessarily because I think he's a locked in top 10, top five player. I just think he has the upside to be able to do it. Speaking of Lenore Sellers, one of the wide receivers or tight end or whatever you want to call him, I guess he's technically going to be a wide receiver when it's all said and done, and he is a wide receiver in this mock draft. Nicholas Harbor from South Carolina, who Lenore Sellers is throwing to, is considered the wide receiver one overall in this mock draft at pick 11 overall. Just so you know who the player is, if you don't know who Nicholas Harbor is by any chance, he has 571 receiving yards total over his first two seasons of playing. He has four total touchdowns in his college career, and he has a 15.0 yards per reception for his career. I'm not hating on the player. He's an extremely he's a DK Metcalf level of athlete as far as size, speed, combination, that kind of thing. But he has not put anything remotely close to DK Metcalf levels of production. And even going back to DK Metcalf, that wasn't even that much production. But he hasn't even put up anything more close to that. So we would have to see once again a giant leap from Harbor here to have him even in the first round, much less the first wide receiver overall. Where's my boy Jordan Tyson at, baby?
Nowhere to be found, unfortunately, in this particular mock draft. But yeah, not only first overall for wide receivers, but 11th. Like, we're talking top 15 draft capital for this guy, who never had a season over 1.5 yards per route run. Like, that. The NFL, you need to have two to be a first round draft pick, I think, at least. Or at least account for like 30% of your team's receiving production. He's not doing any of that. Like you said, 571 total yards. He had 376 last year. He only had 26 catches, ran over 278 routes. So he's out there, but he's not getting targeted and he's not catching balls. So I don't understand it. Yes, he's an athletic freak. 6'5", 235. He can run 100-meter in like 10 seconds. But at some point, you need to be able to play the position of wide receiver, which he hasn't shown us he can do just yet. Um, I know when he came out as a freshman, there was a lot of talk like, "Hey, this is a DN. He's going to play DN because he was a two-way player in high school." I wanted was he the number one overall prospect in college football? He may have
I
been. He
don't
was
think
definitely up
so.
there.
He was up there, but I don't think he was the number one.
He was like top 5 or top 10 as an
He might have been the
athlete.
number one athlete because remember he was coming
Oh
in.
yes.
He was talking about being like an Olympic level athlete as on track and like
Yeah.
all this other stuff. So I mean, he could have been the number one
No,
athlete, but I don't think he was
he
the
was
number one overall player.
definitely he was definitely the number one athlete. And the speculation right up until about signing day was this guy is playing defense. That's what he where he thrives. He's an edge and he's going to play defense. And then South Carolina's like, no, we want him to play on offense, and we told him we'd let him play on offense, and that's what he wanted to do was to play offense. That's why he chose South Carolina. It hasn't happened yet. It could, anything can always happen. If we're saying Lenore Sellers is always all of a sudden going to make this jump to a top 10 quarterback, he's got to throw it to somebody. So why not Nick Harbor? And if that's the case, then maybe. I still don't see him having such a crazy season that he gets up to 11th overall draft capital. But if he goes out there and catches like 1,200 yards receiving and a bunch of touchdowns, sure, why not? But right now we're not there, not even close.
Yeah, and I definitely do not hate on Harbor at all. I was not a huge fan coming out because, like you said, he was very raw. He's just more of an athlete than an actual wide receiver, or definitely or football player. And then there was the talks: is he going to be a tight end? Is he going to be a wide receiver? And I mean, almost from day one, they whether it was him or the team or whatever, they were like, no, he's a wide receiver. And it's like, well, he's kind of one of those like in betweeners, where it's like it's almost he's almost too big to be a wide receiver, but not big enough to be a tight end, like that kind of thing. And especially because he's probably trying to stay as slim as possible for track. I think he actually finally skipped track this offseason and decided just to focus on football. So that is a good thing. I mean, that's a step in the right direction. And like I said, I do not hate him. He is my. This is not including freshman, so he's obviously going to be a little lower. But he's my wide receiver slash tight end 34 right now. So he's probably like wide receiver 50 in Devy Beth, something like that, with the freshmen included. So that's not terrible. There's definitely been players that have jumped up from that range. So it is possible. Obviously you have to see a step forward from Lenore Sellers. We have to see a step forward from Nicholas Harbor. Just what you were saying, the really egregious part, if they had him at 28th overall or something like that, I'd be like, all right, whatever, that's fine. Having him at pick 11 in the first wide receiver out the board, that's where it's like, there's there might not be that much talent in this class, but there's some wide receivers that definitely belong much before you ever mention Nicholas Harper's name. I can mention 34 of them before we before we get there. Well, maybe not 34. They're not all in this draft class, but I can mention quite a few.
Yeah, yeah, and I think McShay has just missed the mark quite a bit with the wide receivers in this mock. Just to run through the rest of them here, and we're going to talk about. Well, we don't need to dwell on too many of them, but right after Nick Harbor, he had Jeremy Bernard going at 12, Evan Stewart going at 14, and then he also has Carnell Tate going at 25, which I could appreciate that. I like Carnell Tate. I love Ohio State receivers. I don't think that's too crazy. But then he falls off the wagon again with Antonio Williams at wide receiver, which I know a lot of people like Antonio Williams. I'm not one of them. And then Makai Lemon at 29, which, again, I can get on board with Makai Lemon at 29. I don't hate it. But then he falls right off the wagon again with DeAndre Moore from Texas at 30, who like almost as egregious as Nick Harbor. I just don't understand how this guy ascends to a first round draft pick after what we've seen so far.
This, and I'm not saying I have no idea how McShay felt about Tez Johnson, but I remember Tez Johnson getting a ridiculous amount of hype this time last year. And it was just like, people were kind of falling out of love with Evan Stewart, and rightfully so. Like, he definitely didn't deserve to be as high as he was in rankings. But people started talking about Tez Johnson being like a potential first round pick in the NFL, the future NFL draft. Obviously, hindsight's 2020, but we're sitting here. We know that Tez Johnson is not a first round pick in the NFL draft. But that was even almost even leading up to the Senior Bowl. People were still talking about Tez Johnson, Tez Johnson. I don't know why this kind of feels like the same thing, and I'm not truly comping the players, but you have a low A dot player, 8.2 A dot for DeAndre Moore, 12.1 yards per reception total. Obviously not a lot of yardage to his name. His PPR points per touch are okay. 425 receiving yards are his best in his best season. You're just it just really seems like you're talking about a slot only receiver that hasn't really done anything in his true college career, and you're expecting some giant step forward. And so that maybe it's just me, but it kind of brings me back to about a year ago when I was hearing Tez Johnson over and over and over again. Obviously at Oregon, a team that everyone had high expectations for going into the season, all that kind of stuff. Here at Texas, same exact thing. People have high expectations for this team, and so you go, oh well, somebody has to take a step forward. I really don't think it's going to be DeAndre Moore.
Yeah. Year 1-0, by the way, too. Didn't even record a catch in his freshman season. And then last year, the stat I always like to look at for wide receivers is yards per route run, and he's 1.4. So again, sitting under 1.5. 2 is where you want to be at, and he's not even close at this point. Now, the one thing he has going for him is Texas didn't really do anything besides bringing a bunch of 5-star freshmen to refill their wide receiving core. 5 4-star guys, high end recruits. They didn't bring any big transfers like they did with Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden. They still have Ryan Wingo, who I think is probably going to be the wide receiver one when it comes down to yardage on that team. But it's just one of those things where it's a very projective thing at this point to say DeAndre Moore is all of a sudden going to be this Josh Downs level slot receiver, because those slot receivers that get this type of draft capital are the primary options in their offense, and they've done it for years. DeAndre Moore hasn't done it for years. He hasn't even done it for 1 year, and it doesn't feel like it's going to happen this year. Even if Arch Manning comes out and just balls out and he can support 3,000-yard receivers next year, which I just don't think that's going to happen. But if it does, maybe DeAndre Moore, we're talking about him in the first round, but it's such a long shot that you don't want to put your all your eggs in your basket on something like that happening.
Yeah, I would almost wonder, like, they have a true freshman in Michael Terry, who's an athlete, an amazing athlete, and they're talking about they want to play him on offense, and so I wonder if they might try to get him the ball in gadgety ways, and that takes away from DeAndre Moore, and he might not even be Moore, that is, might not even be a full time role player. And that's not to say that he won't be out there a decent amount, because, like you said, there's not that much proven talent, unfortunately. But there are some pretty big names, and obviously, I'm a pretty big fan of Cleek Lockett. I think there's other players that are going to get on the field as well. And like you said, DeAndre Moore is just not proven. I get it in this. In this particular season, you do have to take some, you have to make some strides. You have to take some guesses at who's going to be in the first round. So I'm not hating on McShay for what he did towards the end of the round. But man, once again, like, it just seems like there's better players that you could pick and say he's going to take that next step than DeAndre Moore.
Yeah, if I'm Sarkeesian, you already mentioned Michael Terry and Kalik Lockett. Also, they've got Jamie French, Dalen McCutcheon. They've brought in a lot of young guys. There's also Livingstone, who's been on the team for a year now. Parker Livingstone, I'm not saying, he didn't even record a catch last year either, which puts him in the same same stratosphere as DeAndre Moore. But it's just a matter of, do you believe DeAndre Moore is going to be that guy for you, or let's just see what else we got with the younger guys, because insofar we have not seen it from DeAndre Moore.
Exactly. So we picked on McShay quite a bit, probably rightfully so, but let's give him a break there. Greg McElroy Also, McElroy, I guess I should say. Um,
Former Alabama quarterback Greg McElroy.
yes,
You got it.
Greg McElroy, if I could read, uh, gave his top 10 running backs for 2026. Now, I guess we're going into this assuming CFF production and not necessarily for Devy purposes. Because if this is for Devy purposes, then we got a
Yeah.
whole other problem. We got a
I'm
whole
giving
other
him the
issue.
benefit. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt here, but a lot of times I'm like, is this NFL potential or is this? I don't know. But like some of the guys on here is like, it's got to be just for CFF. It's just got to be college production at this point
It
because
has to
some of
be.
the names on
There's
this list.
absolutely no way. I get that it's a down year. I get there's not a lot of running back talent out there, but I promise there's better running back talent than this. But let's try to put our CFF hats on and think of it that way, especially for that number two, because I know that number two player is not necessarily we're not the biggest fans of. But let's try to think of it from a CFF perspective. Now, starting out, number one's pretty easy. He actually is a Debbie player, and I think he's going to do just fine. And that's Jeremiah Love, a player that I was very wrong about after year one, and I'm perfectly willing to admit it. I love him now. I love Love, and I am willing to admit it. I think he's going to be great for CFF purposes. I think he's going to be great. He's going to be at least a top three running back in this draft class when it's all said and done. So it will be for Debbie purposes as well. I have zero issues with him being at one. Do you have any qualms there?
No, this is where he nailed number one, and then the train fell off the rails after that. Like it, everything came crashing down, and that's for us because some people look at it and be like, number two is fine too, but not for me. Number two is not okay for me, and number two for Greg McElroy was Oregon incoming transfer from Tulane, Makai Hughes. I've been on the record for months now since he announced his transfer to Oregon, and everyone started propping him up into a top five Devy running back. This guy is a plotter. He is a volume dependent plotter. He's done it for 2 years at Tulane. He is when is the last time you saw a G5 running back with under a 8% big time run rate actually like ascend and be something beyond what they were in the G5? It does not happen. He would have to do it at Oregon. My thoughts are, and I've said it before, Noah Whittington is as talented or more talented than Makai Hughes. Probably, again, as talented or maybe even a better pass catcher than Makai Hughes. He's going to get at close to an even split when it's all said and done. This is Marcus Carroll 2.0 when he went to Missouri last year. Just a guy who tore up a G5 conference because they gave him 500 touches. Now he's moving to a big program and he's got to run with the big dogs, so to say. And I just don't see it happening on a team like Oregon, who's they're going to have a deep running back room, even beyond guys like Whittington. Like they're gonna see what they have, and I just don't feel like Makai Hughes is going to just take that room by the reins and take over. It's going to be a split of some sort. He's not going to take over any sort of workhorse role.
No, I think what they looked at is, they looked at, he has 551 career rushes, Makai Hughes that is, and they don't have anywhere remotely close to that on their team. That can put up those level of touches and stay healthy and all that kind of stuff. So in fact, there's really no one. There's not too many players that can really rival him. Noah Whittington has 434, so I mean, he's not too far off. But we also, I don't think either one of us thinks that Noah Whittington is this amazing player either. So it's one of those things where I easily see them splitting. I have them ranked very closely, Whittington and Hughes. That is. So I get it. He has a lot of touches, but the point 0.8 PPR points per touch over his career, 0.83 PPR points per touch in his best season, and the big time run rate of 7.5%, which you already touched on over the past 2 years. That doesn't scream take skyrocket this player once he gets to the next level and he actually has to go play against better players. I just don't get it. I don't think that it's going to be amazing. And I would say of all the players on this list, even for CFF production, I just cannot get on board with him being so high. It just not even remotely close. Everyone else, when we're talking strictly CFF, I can almost get on board with most of them. But this one, I just don't get. There's just too much up in the air for me to have him ranked that highly.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because it just feels like it's going to be some sort of a split once Oregon figures out what this backfield is, and they probably have already figured it out. We're just waiting to see it on the field at this point.
Well, that's true, and we haven't. We've been talking about the rookies and everything. We haven't talked as much about spring practices and games and all that. So we'll be getting into that stuff too soon. There might be some reports out there, kind of lending credence to what we're talking about here, or maybe vice versa. I really haven't paid enough attention to it to truly know, but that's what we'll be focusing on here in the upcoming weeks, and we will get into all that. The next player is another one that's this is a little weird. So Katron Allen and Nick Singleton are teammates. They both decided to stay. They were both supposed to come out this season. Both decided to stay in college. I guess you could say there was just too many running backs in this draft class anyway. So what's the point of coming out when you can come out in this upcoming draft class where there might be two or three proven players? Makes a lot of sense. But the weird part is Katron Allen is actually projected ahead of Nick Singleton. I get they both stayed. I get, Katron has always been kind of a thorn in Singleton's side. But if you're a player like Nick Singleton, if you're staying for a fourth year, like you kind of have to put your mark or make your mark in college to change anything about your draft capital and all that kind of stuff. We know he's going to do great at the combine. We know he's an athletic freak, but I just can't get behind Katron Allen being ahead of Nick Singleton. I get it's for CFF, but I don't know. What were they at? I'm going to look it up while so I'm not just asking you or throwing you under the bus here, but I
Yeah.
want to see what their split was last year.
Well, that's the interesting thing is Katron Allen does get more carries,
Hmm.
but his best ability that he can do better than Singleton is do less with more, because he had 5 yards less than him on like 45 more carries, something like that, and four less touchdowns as well. So yeah, I'm with you. I think Katron Allen deserves a spot in the top 10 because he's an 11. Both of these guys had 1,100 yards rushing last year, and both of them have a decent enough big time run rate. But we're talking Singleton at 10%. Singleton, for me, if Singleton came out in this draft, he would have been right there with Travion and Omari and Hampton, and he decided to stay. So for me, he's the running back one. Uh, but to put Katron ahead of him just seems odd because I think the one thing Katron did have going for him after his freshman season was his reliable hands out of the backfield. And then Nick Singleton's like, well, hold on, I can do that too. And then Singleton kind of took over as being the better receiving back, and he's also the better running back. So I
Yeah.
don't understand it at all. If I don't mind either, obviously I think both belong in the top 10, but Katron Allen does deserve to be several spots behind Nick Singleton. Nick Singleton should be, I don't like I said, we don't mind Jeremiah Love being one on this list, but Singleton, if you're going to put Love at one, Singleton needs to be two or three, depending on where you put another guy who we like who wasn't even on this list, which is again something that probably needs to be discussed.
No, I agree. I think I get it. Obviously, they've been very close, but I think if anyone was going to take a step forward and actually be a different player this year, it would be Singleton. It's not going to be Allen. I think we already know who Allen is, just like we basically know who Makai Hughes is. I don't see too much changing there. Desmond Reed is next on the list at 5, and he was a pleasant surprise at Pitt. Not a lot of people had him on their radars. Nothing too. He kind of closer to the Katron Allen than the Nick Singletons of the world, if you will. 5.3 yards per carry. But he does actually have a really nice receiving profile, so we do have to give him that. He's going to he's going to put yards up. He's going to put points up if we're talking about CFF. So I love this for CFF, purposes and everything. But I guess that begs the question: how are we feeling about Reed for actual Debbie purposes?
Yeah, I think again, if this is a CFF list, which we've decided that that's what we're going to call it, I think Desmond Reed is a top 10 running back. Where he would lose it for me as a NFL running back is obviously his size. Very small. I don't even have his measurables in front of me. I want to see he's like 180, 185 pounds, something like that. But
Yeah, I have him
yeah,
at
he's got a
five
guy who
eight,
got
175.
right. So, and they might even be packing on 5 pounds to that. So, 51 receptions, almost 1,000 yards rushing. CFF. He's a CFF guy, and if you're going to put him in your top 10, fine, because he does produce over there at Pitt, and I can't really say anything beyond that.
Yeah, and honestly, it's kind of sad, but he's kind of a plotter. Like he obviously has a receiving profile, but I mean, he has a 6.5% big time run rate at 175 pounds. Like so, it's like you're you're kind of just a plotter at a very small size. I'd say there's zero hope of him actually being an NFL running back, but he can easily put up CFF production. But that actually brings us to the next person on the list, which is Jamal Haynes, and I don't think he's put up as much as we want, but I think he has the ability to put up some, and I kind of like what I've seen so far. But how are you liking Haynes here?
Yeah, I think he's. I mean, he didn't have 1,000 yards last year, but he's come close back to back years to having 1,000 yard rushing. Um, Again, like it comes down to a CFF thing. Um, he's good. I do like Haynes because what is he at, like 10%? He's almost at 10% big time run rate. Not necessarily a big receiver, but I mean he had 28 catches last year, so he can do it. Um, he's been on the team. I think this is his fourth or fifth season with Georgia Tech, so he's been there for a while. He kind of feels like a less exciting Devin Neal to me, honestly. Just like a guy who gets out there and gets it done, but he's never really exploded for like those big time runs, big time plays that you want to see, the highlight reel stuff. Um, but I like him. I think if you're gonna put a top 10 together, I really don't mind Jamal Haynes in it. But that's one of the least crazy things on this list so far.
Yeah, but like you said, just the size is very similar to Desmond Reed, so we're not really thinking NFL player here or anything like that. Unfortunately, we have a couple small guys in a row, but at least we have the big time run rate with Jamal Haynes. We can see some bigger plays going into his fifth year. It's gonna be great for CFF, but here's one where I definitely disagree. Moving on to the next player is Trey Wisner. I get it. He filled in admirably for Texas last year after a couple of their running backs go down with injury. CJ Baxter's back. Maybe he's not 100% healthy. People, especially McElroy here, are saying, hey, he led the team last year. He's going to lead the team this year. And Trey Wisner, Trey might have been like one of the worst actual starting or leading running backs in college last year. Uh, I just did nothing sexy whatsoever. I think it's his job to lose, but all it's going to take is a healthy CJ Baxter or possibly like one of these other recruits or somebody taking a step forward. I don't think it's going to take much. I get we're expecting Arch Manning to be good. We're expecting Texas to be good. So obviously, you have to put somebody up there. I don't hate it, I guess, but once again, I just don't think anything special whatsoever about Trey Wisner.
Yeah, again, less than 7% big time run rate, per, relatively undersized at 200 pounds. He's got CJ Baxter coming back, who we all, whether or not he's 100% healthy or not, I think most people expect him to take over that role at some point. He did have 44 catches last year. which was, exciting. But I just don't think that that's really, a huge part of his game when it's all said and done. Um, if anything, that's just going to be his role moving forward once they figure out CJ Baxter is the better runner on that team. And I'm not even a big CJ Baxter guy. I just feel like Trey Wisner, we've already seen it. It's not there. Let's see what CJ Baxter. We probably, if you're Texas, you've paid a lot of money for this guy to be here. He's healthy now. Let's see what he's got. We're gonna give him the carries.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I guess if Baxter is not healthy, then all you really have there is what Jarrett Gibson and I can't remember who they brought in, but there's not a lot of competition there. So I get having him up here. I just think it's going to be Baxter when it's all said and done. That brings us to number 8. We got Isaac Brown on this one. Are you fighting him on Greg on this one, or are you okay with Isaac Brown being there?
I like Isaac Brown again. Like he loves these undersized guys. He's another 190-pound guy, but true freshman, great season. Just he just feels like a CFF guy for now. Could he pack on 10 pounds and take a leap forward this season? It's certainly possible, but as of right now, it feels like a CFF only type situation. But it's certainly something that we should probably be monitoring because if you look at his um, I'm trying to pull up his big time run rate here. Well, Duke Watson's on that team too, but it was Isaac Brown who had 1,200 yards rushing, and his big time run rate was
15.3%.
yeah, right, which was crazy. That is insane.
Yeah, of
Especially
all the
considering he
players that
had
we've talked about, the smaller players and everything that we've talked about tonight, like he's the only one that I'm really like okay with considering as a possible Devy asset. You know,
absolutely
he's 5'9", 190 is what I have him listed at. But you talk about 5'9", 190 with a 15.3% big time run rate, like you know what? I can get on board with it. The PPR points per touch
yeah.
are there. Like everything is there that I love to see for a player like that. And it's not even necessarily like small school or anything like that that we have to truly worry about like a step up in competition or whatever. I just I like I said, I think this is one of the few on this list that we can actually say like there's Debbie viability here as well.
Yeah, and he was a freshman last year, so let's. I was a huge Bucky Irvin guy. If he gets in that 195 to 200 range, all aboard. Honestly, like this is a guy you want to get right now. I think his cost is probably a little bit higher than maybe where it needs to be at this point, but it could be worth it if he does pack on a couple extra pounds and continues what he did last year.
It's probably talking or showing more about what this class is like, this upcoming class. But I'm just realizing I have Isaac Brown very high in my ranks, so it's kind of crazy. You're talking about a sophomore running back who's undersized, but showing a lot of upside, a lot of athleticism, which we love to see. Obviously we'd love to see him get a little bit larger, but he is a true sophomore, so it's definitely possible that it can happen. Whereas with some of these players, it probably not going to happen. Once again, it's probably talking more about the actual like shape of the class than it is Isaac Brown per se. But I love him here at 8. He should probably be higher. He should definitely be higher than Trey Wisner. I know that much. But that brings
Oh
us
yeah,
to
yes, no
Ahmad
doubt.
Hardy and Jaden Ott rounding it out. Now, I know we got the transfer out for Ott. We were both basically out on Ott up until the transfer. We'll have to get your, if you see if you're actually back in or not here in a second. But what are we feeling about Hardy before we get to Ott?
I think we already know what we got with Hardy because Missouri showed us what they did with Marcus Carroll last year, and they're essentially the same player. Um, Plotter, less than 7% big time run rate, volume dependent, doesn't catch the ball a lot. I don't really have much more else to say other than that. This he is what he is. He's probably at best he's going to be a touchdown dependent guy like Carroll was.
Yeah, I mean, it's this is the Mackay Hughes all over again. You know, your plotter. It's nothing I'm excited about. Definitely not a player that I'm freaking out about. You know, and you're looking at a lot of the same things like point 0.9 PPR points per touch overall, 0.93 PPR points per touch in his best season. Almost no receiving profile whatsoever. Zero point 0.7 receptions per game, 6.3% big time run rate. I get it. You know, it's probably going to work out for CFF purposes, but this is not a player that I'm going out of my way to get. And you know that's not necessarily our focus, but our focus is for Devy. I guess for both things, Jade not for CFF and then back for Devy with the transfer out. We were, like I said, we were completely out. We were ready to move on after last year. We'll call it a true debacle of a season, but now he's kind of getting a second or third or whatever chance going to Oklahoma, right?
Yeah, and we were probably higher on Ott than everybody for the first 2 years of his career. And then he does what he did last year and 3.3 yards per carry, big time run rate, fell through the floor all of a sudden, and basically takes a back seat to Javian Thomas as a running back. He did lead the team in receptions out of the backfield, so there's that. And he's going to a really great offensive coordinator in Arbuckle at Oklahoma. My thing is, I don't think I can sit here and say he's the running back one. They still have Javante Barnes. They still have Taylor Tatum. They still have Xavier Robinson. Any of those guys? No, I'm not saying any of them are great, but any of those guys could be better than Jaden Ott. So the fact that people are saying, "Oh, he's at Oklahoma now, and now he's the top 10 running back for Devy and potentially a top 5 running back for next year's draft class," I don't see it. Especially after what we saw last year at Cal, it was just kind of brutal.
So I will say, with even as bad of a season as he had, like you said, we were higher on him before. You know, a couple seasons ago, we were pretty high on Jaden Ott. So he's had highs, he's had lows. The funny thing is, he's actually like essentially tied in Debbie Beth with Katron Allen. So we were talking about before how we don't really think Katron Allen is necessarily going to be an NFL running back, or at least not like a stud NFL running back or anything like that. We're not overly concerned about him for Debbie purposes, but obviously he can put up CFF numbers, and he can put up decent numbers in college. And I'm kind of thinking the same way here with Jay Knott. Something's gonna have to drastically change for me to be like, oh yeah, he's back. We're back, baby. It was just an injury. I guess it's possible, but it seems to be kind of like he's been going in the wrong direction. Let's just put it that way. And so to say that all of a sudden he's just going to be a stud. And obviously I've heard people saying, why would he go to Oklahoma unless he was going to be the lead back, or at least have a shot at being the lead back? I mean, I guess that does actually make sense, if you're just thinking about it, common sense wise. But at the same time, how do you, as a coach, or who it's our boy, it's our what the hell's his name, Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl. He's now the GM of Oklahoma. How does Jim Nagy go and say like, oh yeah, you're our guy no matter what, you're our starter, after looking at what he's done the past couple seasons?
Yeah, that's where it comes down to it for me is just I don't think that anyone could say even as bad as Javante Barnes has been from time, and Taylor Tatum had his fumbling issues last year, but it's like the Luther Burden effect. He had a great season, he had 2 great seasons, and then he just fell off a cliff. Like, are we really going to put our trust in a guy who that happened to, injury or not? Because he was still out there playing, and he wasn't like, those volume adjusted metrics were not there anymore. They were bad. So if he's playing injured, I he really hurt himself. He should have just not played at all, and then things maybe were going to be better. And if that's the case, I don't know because we're not privy to that sort of information. But as of right now, I just feel like Oklahoma could go in any direction. They've got guys on their team that are could be as good as that. Maybe they're worse. I don't know, but we'll see. We're going to find out. Obviously, September rolls around.
Absolutely. So, this has been a little dive into. I didn't even realize we were over an hour. I've been. We're just sitting here talking crap about McElroy and McShay here, and yeah. So it's a nice little dive in. Obviously, we don't have Aaron tonight, so we are just sitting here rambling on about this kind of stuff. But we will be actually diving into the players that we do like, and not just talking crap about the ones in the bad lists and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully, you guys have enjoyed this. Hopefully, you guys are either done with your rookie drafts or doing well with them. Hopefully, we helped you out with that. I know it's been a lot of fun for me moving around the draft. This has been a weird year for rookie drafts, where there's a lot of value left over. There's a lot of value in the third, fourth round guys that you were like, oh, I had a second round grade on them, and things like that. So it's been a really fun and very interesting rookie draft period here. So we will be diving into all that kind of stuff coming back. Hopefully, we'll have Aaron back once we are back in your ears next week. But for now, we're going to go ahead and cash